In the psychiatrist's chair, Spike Milligan talks to Dr. Antony Clare.
Terence Alan Milligan, Spike Milligan's full name, was born on April 16th, 1918 in India. He spent the first 14 years of his life there before he and his family moved to London. He served as a lance bombardier in the Second World War and was blown up by a shell in the Italian campaign. In 1951, his career as a comic genius took off with the BBC radio series The Goons. Some years later, his first marriage broke up and he himself had the first of a series of mental breakdowns. Spike Milligan is an extraordinary constellation of talents. Comedian, novelist, poet, actor, conservationist, playwright. Tell me, are you a person given to musing about yourself, looking at your achievements and what's brought you to where you are?
I'm very much a Hamlet, very melancholic actually. I can't seem to sleep at night without trying to think of terrible things like when my first marriage broke up and I watched the haunting face of my children who'd lost their mother, and I never quite got over that. I just can't get over it. It's left a scar on me. I know it left a scar on them, and I can't wait to keep up with trying to love them enough to make up for all those shortcomings.
Were you always a melancholic person? What about your childhood, your early childhood?
Seemed a pretty melancholic person, yes. I seemed to be a loner, and I think I actually took to comedy to break the monotonous relief away from myself, which was always down.
Your accounts of the first years in India.
You mean you found the accounts? Good God, I thought I'd burnt them.
They're always positive, pastoral recollections. It's a time that you seem to, for once, look fairly positively at things.
My childhood was like a litmus paper in the sun. It recorded it very well, and I appreciated it very well.
Were you happy?
Do you know what? I don't know. I think I must have been. No, I don't think I was. No. I don't think I was quite happy. I wet the bed a lot, which is usually a sign of psychological unhappiness.
What is your first memory?
My first memories? It's totally abstract. It's looking through a brass porthole and seeing a yacht on a very blue sea. Second memory was falling down a Victorian staircase to the bottom.
Was the first related to travelling to England?
I think there must have been.
Yes.
Very early then, because I was only 1 year of age.
Then you must have gone back to India and lived there for...
Between India and Burma, up to the age of 13 or 14.
Yes.
All the very formative years.
But you don't think they were happy?
I don't think so, no. I don't think I was happy.
Why?
I don't know. My father was away a lot.
He was a soldier.
He was away a lot from home. My mother was very highly strung and not cruel, but used to beat me sometimes quite violently. And I think there was this resentment that I didn't have anybody to go to. When you get beaten by your mother, you go to your father and vice versa. I don't know. It's a mystery. I'd like to be put asleep one day and asked about it in a hypnotic trance to find out.
Well, when you say your mother was highly strung, what sort of woman
She was hanging from a rope from the ceiling. No, that's a joke, no. She was highly strung. I suppose she was having no sexual intercourse with my dad. She was a Catholic. She could go around with men. I suppose there's a lot of tension in that case.
Was she given to depressions?
No, she seemed stabilised at a hysterical level. That's all it was.
I mean, were you frightened of her?
A little bit, yes. A little bit, yes, I was.
You had a brother?
No, she had a brother. She had the brother.
Yes, quite.
I'm taking it right now.
I rephrased that.
Thank you very much.
She had
It's
a second
miracle.
son.
Yes, she did. Yes.
Desmond.
Desmond Patrick, yes. Born in Rangoon.
Now, was he very much younger than you?
8 years, about 8, 9 years younger than myself.
So you were, for all practical purposes, you grew up as an only child?
Yes.
What was your schooling in India like?
Well, my mother, once again, tried to keep me away from the realities of the world, which was going to turn me into a neurotic. She sent me to a girls' school, a convent, which is very, very nice. It's a female society all the way around me. I was being nurtured into a very gentle society, and the world wasn't like that. And I was reasonably happy. I had some traumatic experiences. I mean, I ran away because I'd fallen in the mud in the playground once. I couldn't bear the thought of going back in the classroom with all these girls and myself covered in mud, so I got a tonga and took it back home. And next day, this appalling Mother Superior got the whole school out in a line and stood me in front of them and bawled me out left, right and centre and threatened to expel me. Now, I found that appalling in retrospect.
And you can still remember that?
I could still remember. It was very painful.
Yes.
Yes. I never got over it.
Would you say that you were a sensitive child?
Yes, ultra-sensitive. I was very aware of cruelty. I don't know why. Instance was we were walking in the back of the houses in Pune, and they used to shoot the pariah dogs, or pariah, we call them pariah. And the dog shooter saw this pariah, and he shot it, and he blew it in two, except the spine was still connected. And I noticed that dog's guts were blown all over the place, but its tail was still wagging a bit. And this chap actually went, this gun shooter, and it wagged its tail for him. And I said to him, please put it out of its misery. And then he did. He shot it again. I remember the bullet entered its head and blew both its eyes out, came out like on stalks.
What age were you then?
About 6, 7.
Yeah.
I was growing up and didn't find people very pleasant, and I was certainly going towards animals more than people.
Was your brother similar to you in temperament as he grew up?
Yes, we grew up very, very close together, and very much like the Bronte sisters. We seemed to turn away from the world and create our own world. We created our own world called the Mania, and we used to make little towns in the garden out of mud and run the country ourselves the way we wanted it to be run.
What became of your brother? Has he had any problems with his sensitivity? Has he?
None at all. He grew up as different from me emotionally as I was a psychoneurotic and he wasn't.
What is your explanation for that?
My neurosis.
For the difference, the two people growing up in fairly similar environments.
When he was born, my mother and father were closer together. My mother was cooling down a bit because she was, as I say, she was cohabiting, having sexual intercourse, which relieves a lot of stress and strain, I suppose, among adults. And he grew up with me to hang on to as well. And my mother had cooled down emotionally a bit. Still a bit of a terror she was. But he didn't have the pressure put on him like I had on me, because my mother was very young and without her man, I suppose.
What sort of pressure? Can you give me an example of the kind of demand she made on you?
Well, it was eat up all your dinner, and if you don't do that, God will strike you dead. And I had to go to church, and God is watching you, and you mustn't play with little black boys, and they're Anglo-Indians and all this. And I was being filled up with a load of guns, empirical guns, and deep down I wasn't born to be that type of person. I was meant to be a liberal.
Did that make you angry?
It did make me angry because the tragedy of childhood is you have no parliament for the child. All the cards are stacked in favour of the adult. Child can't say, I'm going to write to the Times about this, that you told me. He has to accept it.
Yes. She was a very religious woman, your mother.
Over-religious, yes. But it was an indoctrinated religion, and there was no depth of intellect behind it. I mean, I didn't get an education like I'd like to have got from the Jesuits. Did
you have at school, dramatics or amateur dramatics? Or was there any evidence of the talent that was to emerge later?
It's remarkable, you should say. There's a direct answer, yes. When I was at the convent of Jesus and Mary in Pune, they had done the usual nativity play, and they didn't know what to do with me. And they said, we're going to dress you up as a clown. That was kismet, wasn't it? So I was dressed up as a clown.
What age were you?
With the black face. I was 6.
Yes.
6. And I remember one thing. They said, now when all the angels go around the crib, you mustn't come on the stage. That wouldn't be right for the clown to be there. And I thought that was wrong. And when they were on the crib, something intuitive in the child in me, I went out, I stood in front of the crib, and I took off my pointed hat, and everybody applauded. I remember that to this day.
Did they laugh?
Oh, they laughed at me as a clown. What they had in between the scene changes, they wanted somebody to go outside. So I used to go outside. They said, go outside, pull the curtains, and jump up and down and pull funny faces, which I did. I didn't quite sure. I heard this laughter. And I remember it sounded very good. And it's strange that I should start as a clown and be a clown.
Yes. You've liked that sound ever since.
Yes. I like the sound of being a clown. People say I'm a comic, and I'm not. I'm really a clown.
Yeah. Coming to England, again, from reading what you've said about it on one or two occasions, that was quite a change. You came to England because, as I understand it, your father, who was a soldier, was one of the victims of the Ramsay MacDonald government cuts. They reduced the armed forces and he was out of a job.
Yes.
And you came to England early 30s, and you came to the rather unpromising land of Catford, Lewisham. Quite a difference from India.
Yes, it was. It was a traumatic change, both from the race of people called the English, as I knew them in India, where they're much happier and brighter living in the sun, as the gloom that infested England at that time of unemployment. We went to live in an attic, believe it or not, and my brother and I turned right inwards. We cut off from the world.
Do you think you've ever got over that?
No, never have. I realised that it changed me completely. I got very turned in. And as I say, I think comedy in me is the only way I can break out and get out to the outside world.
You went to a fairly tough school.
I went to St Saviour's School in Lewisham. There's a Catholic church. I had to walk 2 miles every day and back. And I had a quota of bullies there, and I was never a big, strong boy.
Did you have any contact with girls before,
Yes,
say, the army?
I was very romantic. When I was very young, about 7 or 8, I fell in love with a little Persian girl called Fakhri Shah. And I actually carried her books to school, of all things. Yes, I did. Then I fell in love with another girl called Charmaine, and I used to walk around outside a house in Pune, whistling an Irving Berlin tune called Charmaine. I don't know if you ever heard it. They thought I was a loony outside. Yes, I didn't have much success in my amours until about the age of 21.
Because?
I was very shy, terribly shy. I thought sex was evil and kissing was evil. That's the atmosphere the Catholic Church gave me, you know.
Were you anxious in the sense of bite your nails or avoid
I did bite
parties?
I did bite my nails a lot, and I was not a very good mixer until I took up music. I took up the guitar.
You had a passion for jazz.
Yes, I did. I liked jazz very much.
You say until, but in fact you still describe yourself as a man who is very tense.
Yes, I was very tense, I suppose.
And
yes.
you still are.
Yes, I am. It's like a coiled spring, like a cobra waiting to strike. I don't know what it is. That's just how I am, you know. I can't do anything about it.
Yes, the reason I ask that is that at times, as I understand it, the story of you has a change in it. It's this bomb injury, the war injury in Italy, where things are often described as having changed after it. But at other times, it sounds as if you were always sensitive, always tense, always a rather anxious person.
Yes, to prove that I was neurotic, I just have to have the mechanism inside me tripped. And this mortar bomb blew me up, and it did it.
You used the word neurotic.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you?
It meant to me a chap who got blown up by a bomb in the war and started to cry and shake and shiver, and they said, you are a psychoneurotic. And I thought all men who got blown up by bombs were PNs.
And now?
Well, now I realise it's a vast spectrum. It's a lot of people uncertain, insecure, frightened of the world, brought up badly or over-coveted. And it also sometimes gives you brilliance, like Van Gogh or El Greco, all neurotics. It's a gift and a curse at the same time, you know. I mean, you get the pain much worse than anybody else, but you see a sunrise much more beautiful than anybody else.
And would you forgo the one for the other?
No, I having reached the age of 65, I realised that this bath of fire I went through has made me a much more tolerant human being with a vast spectrum of understanding and tolerance for people. And it's like a Toledo blade. You put it into this fire, it comes out much finer, you know.
But are you a tolerant man?
Not of idiots and fools. If anything is retrograde and pulling the world down and destroying the future for children or conflicting things on suffering on animals, I will combat it. If that's called intolerance, then I'm intolerant. I wouldn't say that's intolerance, though.
Well, for example, do people say you're intolerant? Your secretary, Norma Farnes,
yes,
in an introduction to your collected letters, wrote of you, he can cause absolute chaos and tension because he can't get someone on the telephone at the precise moment when he wants to talk to them. Now, whatever about the rights and wrongs of that, it's not normally the thing that we would ascribe to a tolerant person.
No. What would you ascribe it? You're a psychiatrist. What would you put that down to? Your house is on fire and you can't get through to the fire brigade and you're swearing.
But that's a very dramatic example.
I just extended the story a little bit.
I'd say that there might be some evidence to suggest that you're quite an impatient man.
Yes, I think I don't have much patience, yes. I think you're right. And yet other times I spend hours over one page of script getting it, of a book, manuscript, getting it right. I rewrote Pakun 5 times. That would be something on the rate of the size of the Bible if it put all together. I rewrote it 5 times. Such was my desire for perfection. So that shows a complete opposite, doesn't it?
But it illustrates a patience with yourself.
Ah, very good. Touché.
But with others?
I don't know the others. With them, I'm impatient with idiots, yes, I must agree to yes, to a fault.
Now, when you get depressed, as you do from time to time, do you feel guilty about that?
No, I realise that I'm a victim of a condition, and I just go and lock myself in my room and stay away for a couple of days.
I mean, do you ever feel you're hard on other people?
Please, God, let me tell the truth. No, I don't think so, Tony. I might demand the truth of them, but I'm not actually hard on people.
When you had the first breakdown, that's really around the time of the bomb near Monte Cassino. It wasn't actually Monte Cassino, as I understand. It was
to the
near.
left, Mont Dimiano, Cosi Dimiano.
Were you invalided out of the army?
No, they gave me some tablets. It was the early days of deep narcosis, which you know, but they didn't do that. They gave me some early tranquilizers, I think, which sent me to sleep, sent me behind the lines for 7 days, then sent me up to the guns. And as soon as I had the guns go, I started to stammer. Now, I don't know to this day whether I introduced the stammer myself, because having failed to get out of the army one way, I thought the stammer might do this. I don't know if I'm making this up or not, but I've always been guilty about the fact that I might have run away, and I should hate to think I did, because I didn't want to. I thought it was a just war for a just cause.
Yes. And what happened then?
Then, when they saw the state I was in, they took me out of the line, and I went to a psychiatrist, and he said, "I'm sorry, Mohammed," I said, it would be dangerous for you to go up the line in this condition. He said, "It wouldn't be fair to your comrades." And I said, "I see that." I said, "Will I get better?" He said, "Well, I don't know. On the whole, it doesn't seem as if people like you do." He said, "Well, we'll put you in a base camp." I went to a base camp, and I had a couple more breakdowns while I was there, and that put paid to me. I did try to get back to the regiment, though. I wrote to the major, but they wouldn't have it. What I understand now, you can't have duff people in the firing line.
Did you feel a sense of failure?
Oh, yes, and the major stood me up and said, "You're a coward." And that was an appalling thing to say to a man. There's no crime in being a coward, mind you. But I didn't think I was a coward, inasmuch that I'd been in action all through the North African campaign and all the way up to Cassino. If I'd been a coward, I'd have run away the first day, wouldn't I? Tell me that.
Yes, I think that's
so.
true.
Well, I think I just run out of steam, that's all.
It said it, and I just want to hear your view of it, that the Goons was a turning point in your life.
Oh, yes, it gave me some money for a start. I didn't have much money. And I didn't really exploit the Goons, but I was very happy letting go with Flights of Fantasy, which were being mouthed by two men who I thought were superb performers, and I've never had the like of them to work for me since.
They were?
Harry Seacombe, Peter Sellers and Michael Bentine.
You got married around this time?
Yes, I did. Actually, I was mad. The girl proposed to me. She said, "Will you marry me?" And I thought, I didn't want to disappoint her, so I said yes.
Had you known her long?
Oh, I'd known her about a year. I think it was physical love, though. She had big boobs, and I didn't.
What age were you then?
It seems like the Stone Age from where I'm standing now. I was about 33, I think.
But in fact, that marriage lasted, several years anyway.
Well, 5, 6 years, yes.
And
I was impossible. My neurosis was appalling. I was so insecure, I was blaming for everything, you know. And she just couldn't take any more of it. The girl was absolutely right. She was just a nice girl.
What, you mean you were impossible?
I was impossible, yes. But I was ill. I wasn't consciously. I was ill and impossible.
In what sense?
I was intolerant. I'd say, "Don't spend so much money. Don't do this and don't do that. And where have you been? And why is my dinner ready?" It was appalling. I was screaming at being alive, in fact.
You were writing scripts for the Goons?
Oh, yes. And that was great pressure until midnight. It really destroyed me. It destroyed my marriage, I suppose, the Goon Show. So people said, "Maybe it did make you happy." I said, "No, it didn't make me happy, the Goon Show, no. It was a disaster. It lost my children their mother. It lost me a wife who was a very good person. And the scar is unbearable deep, especially with the children.
Because? They blamed you?
Well, children are wonderful. They don't blame anybody. But I could see, I was looking at some photographs I'd kept, and I suddenly looked at these faces around that time, and I flipped the pages, and I suddenly thought, my God, how unhappy these children were. And I couldn't believe it. I thought, what a terrible thing for adults to do to children.
Why do you use the word ill about that time?
I was ill. I wasn't normal. I was abnormal. I was very strange. I was very strange indeed. I was mentally ill. No two ways about it. I shouldn't have been working. But I had to hang on to this job. always was a very good job. And I went in and out of mental homes about once every 6 months.
But at this time, when you say you were ill, you were turning out classic comedy material.
It's amazing, yeah. It was amazing.
Could you have done it if you hadn't been ill?
I must admit, it's a strange thing you say this, Tony. The best scripts I wrote were when I was ill. I've just recalled these. The ones that I wrote best was when I was ill. There's a mad desire to be better than anybody else at comedy. And if I couldn't do it in the given time of 8 hours a day, I used to work 12, 13 and 14. I did. I was determined. There was a time when I was positively manic.
What about other symptoms?
I was 4 foot above the ground at times, talking twice as fast as normal people, like this, gripped with this great fervour to write this stuff and to hear them do it every Sunday. I couldn't wait for them to do it, to hear how it sounded. Because it acclaimed. When it went down, I thought, I've done it. Then I had to go and start it all over again. That was the awful part of it.
But there was a sensation of being high.
Oh, yes, God, it was. And when I, in retrospect, look back at it and I think, was that really me? Was I 10 foot off the ground all the time? And I was. I was terribly manic.
Were you ever violent?
I wanted to be violent, but somehow I felt inhibited by doing it. I thought that would be the last straw if I turned violent. I did feel violent.
You wanted
I felt
to
like killing people.
When was the first time you went into a hospital in this country?
It was about 1956, Woodside, St. Luke's Hospital, Woodside at Highgate.
And what did that do for you?
Well, thank God they gave me deep narcosis. And I went to sleep for about 3 weeks. And that seemed to break the tension. But I was still ill in fact, I think I've only just sort of managed to land again in the last 4 or 5 years. I've just started to become myself. It's got better. I think I'm being cured. But now, when I get depressed, I try and get something from this terrible sadness that comes on me and create something in terms of poetry, which I am doing lately.
But that's an example of you controlling it to some extent.
Yes, I'm getting better at controlling it now, Tony.
But what about when the depression, you're busy and you get depressed and you can't snap out of it? After all, you, like so many people who suffer from this, get very irritated with people who say snap out of it.
Oh, that's silly.
Yes.
It's like saying to a man with a broken leg, come on, walk and you'll be all right.
But most people get depressed.
Not to the extent that an neurotic does. You can tell it. I mean, you can tell it. You see, the mere fact you haven't been this side of this emotional fence, I can tell you've never been this deep down yourself. I can tell it. It's just like well, you just can, that's all. Difficult to describe.
Why is it difficult to describe?
Well, it's invisible. There's no written diagrams of it, It's an abstract. It's a sensation, and you cannot... If you ask people to paint it, most depressives will draw black. Have you noticed that?
Yes.
Always black paintings all over the place. So we know it has no colour for a start.
Yes, can I press you about this? Because some people might say, listening to you, that you describe at times a manipulative ability. That is, you turn on and off your moods to get things around you changed. Or you have some control over it.
Yes, I do.
But at other times, you say that you have no control over it, and people who would suggest that you should just don't know what it's like.
Early days, I had no control over it, but as, like, getting used to a hump on your back. By the time you're 60, if you're a hunchback, you got pretty used to having a hump on your back.
That's getting used to it, but it's not doing anything to reduce it.
No.
Can you actually do anything to ease your depression yourself?
Well, the circumstances have changed whereby which I have a woman in my life now who suits me admirably. That's taken a great amount of weight off my shoulders. It's made a great difference to my life. It's given me a great degree of satisfaction having somebody so loving and understanding with me, which I've never had before.
Is she very tolerant?
Very, very tolerant, yes. Yeah.
Now,
perhaps because she used to work for the BBC.
Now, you married again, not this lady, because you had a second wife who died very tragically.
Yes. Fatty, yes.
Now, she, as I understand it from, again, what I've read about it, was a very important person in your life.
Yes, she was. She was very strong, very powerful, and gave my children, who were sort of social orphans at the time, gave them a mother. She gave up her own career. She was a superb singer, and she gave it up to look after my children. I'm eternally grateful to her for her. And she gave me a third daughter, who was a sheer delight and the living image of her mother, and a talented musician. So that was good. And
How did she cope with your moods?
very well. She understood, that's all. She was a bit neurotic herself, but she understood.
Do you think you have to be a bit neurotic to understand?
Well, yes, I suppose one murderer would understand another murderer much better than one who wasn't.
What about the understanding you have got of yourself? How would you describe yourself?
Well, somebody who's very late in life developed, matured very, very late in life.
Would you have preferred to stay a child?
Yes, I think I have stayed a child all my life. That's why I get on much easier with children, any time. As soon as I get a child in my house, I get on with it more than anybody else. Marvellous it is. Great fun. It's like having your own captive fairy. It's marvellous. All that gurgling laughter that comes out if you do the right things.
But there are other characteristics of children. They can be self-centered, demanding, intolerant.
Well, yes, that's because who isn't? A child is born at the centre of its universe, you know. It's born a little savage. He messes in his nappy. But it should be given a chance to extricate itself from the complete abstraction of life. It knows nothing. It has no focal point, has no terms of reference. It just sees these things around it, operating on it, and as you know, mostly they tell it what to do all the time. And you can suppress and iron out a whole personality if you don't give it a chance to present itself. I think it was Khalil Gibran, was it, who said that we are the bow and the child is the arrow, and once it's sped on its course, nothing could take it nearing from its destiny.
But I'm struck that as you describe that, the child, you're describing yourself.
Is that so? Is that what I presented to you today? Thanks for the psychiatry.
No,
doc.
no, not today. No, but the impatience with the rest of the world and with a lot of people in it, the feeling that there are much simpler solutions than these highly sophisticated so-called adults have, the desire to cut through it all.
Yes, there is a great desire to do that. You know, when I can do it in my own time, I find it very pleasing to be able to put a typewriter, put my paper in and go straight at it and write a book. Nothing between me and that. That's a great pleasure. To paint a picture is a great pleasure. But getting out into a motor car, getting into the traffic, getting it filled up with petrol and the air, the shouting and the screaming, it is an appalling world. Nobody's very pleased with it.
But you're certainly not pleased with it.
No, couldn't be, no.
And how do you cope? Are there several people in your life who organise it for you?
No, I'm pretty much the organiser. I have the cooperation of my wife and my family and my nana, and I handle it like this. I keep up very good standards in my home. We have manners, we're civilised, we do things properly, we have a Sunday tea and friends round. I have a boring Sunday English tea with no television or radio. We sit and talk, go out to dinner occasionally, and we put on evening dress, and I put a rose in my jacket, so we look as if we've got some kind of style. It's not snobbery, it's the fun of dressing up like when you were a child. And my children all love it.
Yes.
I love it. I love putting on the style. It's a yesteryear style, though, not the future.
In all the episodes involving hospitals, what did you make of psychiatrists?
They themselves vary as much as their patients, as you know.
Was there anyone, though, that you were able to talk to about your fears and their origins? You said to me earlier in this interview that you'd quite like, in a way, to somehow be hypnotised or put to sleep, and then a lot of things to be unravelled.
Well, wouldn't it be very interesting? I'd like to hear the recording of what I was like as a child. I mean, I only heard the other day that I ran away from home when I came to England because my mother insisted I went to church every Sunday, and I lived 3 months with somebody else. Well, there must be things before that. I'd like to know what happened.
Even at that time, can you remember, for example, intense feelings like anger with your mother?
Yes, I remember I had an exploding temper on 3 or 4 occasions, terrible exploding temper. Savage it was, you know, screaming and yelling. And then I noticed it in my youngest daughter one night. She started to scream and shout. And I thought, is this the primeval scream? Life itself is very, very painful for a child. How helpless she must feel. Tiny, small, lost, no power, everything being applied to it and they not being applied themselves to anything. I thought, she's screaming just for the fact that she's alive, and it's very painful. And I'm certain I am right on this issue. Sorry, I'm banging the table and thumping the mic.
There is, in some of your poetry and in things you say about making people laugh and so on, a remarkable harkening back to childhood. For instance, you wrote in 1959 a poem entitled Indian Boyhood.
Yes.
Which goes, "What happened to the boy I was? Why did he run away? And leave me old and thinking like there'd been no yesterday? What happened then? Was I that boy who laughed and swam in the Bund, which is a canal in Pune? Is there no going back, no recompense? Is there nothing, no refund?" And
I think
Eric Sykes once said about you, "Spike's the kind of person who should live in a utopia without rates, parking meters and concrete." And I thought, well, India was like that.
Yes, it was too, wasn't it? Yes. Well, all childhood is free of rates and parking. When you're a child, you don't pay rates.
No, but there's no concrete.
It's a distant reflection of one, yes. That was, I thought, the total nostalgia. I'm glad you read that poem. It makes me believe now that I might have had a happy childhood. Because it's yearning for it there, isn't it?
Yes, there is. I sense in your view of laughter that it is that you associate very much humour with something childish, in the best sense of that word, with something...
Well, there's always been a child running through my head laughing all through my life, all the time. I just don't seem I can get old. Not old enough to get away from it. I seem to be always... I have a childish... What's the word? Childish charisma inside me. And I love it.
Does it get you into trouble?
No. It gets raised eyebrows, you know what I mean? I suddenly talk to somebody in the street right off the cuff, they look surprised.
I mean...
If a child said it, hello, they would smile and down and say hello. But if you're a grown-up child like I am, they don't say it. They're a bit surprised.
I mean, would you say that at times you are bloody difficult to live with?
Yes, perhaps I might be difficult at times, but not be known as a difficult person. I would only have my proportionate amount of difficulty that you might have in you. I'm not an exceptionally difficult person.
You're not?
Not really, no, I don't think so. If they find me difficult, they must be an awful pain in the arse to themselves.
Why are you so frightened of being thought of as bloody difficult?
That's a very good question, I suppose, because I want to be a decent person. I don't want to make life painful for people, because a lot of people made life painful for me. I know how bloody awful it can be to have a painful life. And I try to avoid that. In the essence, as I say, I've never struck my children.
You mean it would be very difficult for you to cope with the notion that, despite all your efforts, you fail on occasion?
Well, it's very bad for me to imagine. I'm not saying I'm a prophet or an apostle or a disciple or a saint, that I set my sights on some kind of humanity which doesn't exist at this moment. It would be on the utopian scale. That's what it is. And to think then that I was reduced to being just an appalling person, I think, well, what kind of message am I trying to preach when I myself am committing the very crimes that I'm trying to tell people I don't want committed? That is to be a difficult person. So
yes, but I didn't say were you a difficult person. I said were you at times a difficult person.
I did say at times, but I apportioned it as much as you'd be difficult and anybody else would be difficult.
For example, you said in an interview that before your nervous breakdown, I don't know whether this is true or not, but you said before a nervous breakdown you'd been quiet and gentle, but afterwards you'd had to become tough to survive.
I did, that's so true, Tony.
Tough people are at times tough to live with. To survive in the business world, as you say, you've got to be tough.
Well,
won't you hurt people?
Well, I'll have to make an example. I spent an hour 3 nights ago trying to catch a moth at 1 a.m. and to put it out the window. I don't know where that puts me.
That won't wash, because I'm sure there are many examples you can give me of your decency. And at the moment, I'm not pursuing your decency. I'm
trying
pursuing
to get my
that.
credentials. Yes, I suppose, yes. I'm all for this cross-examination. I find more about myself. I was just wondering where I was at then. I don't know, you see. I mean, I don't know. I wish I could walk on the water.
There's linked with that is a view you have of life. I seem to be reading all your poetry, but I was again struck by another poem. It's much shorter. And again, I'll read it if I may.
Please.
It's, I can't remember the name of it, I'm afraid, but it goes...
Call it Eric.
The new rose trembles with early beauty. The babe sees the beckoning carmine. The tiny hand clutches the cruel stem. The babe screams, the rose is silent. Life is already telling lies. Now, in addition to being an interesting insight, that is a vision of life as essentially a betrayal. It lets you down.
That's very good, Tony. 100 marks for that.
Yes, I liked it. But
It is. You're dead right. I'm just trying to agree that you're dead right. Life does let you down, doesn't it?
Is-
I mean, there's no rehearsal for it.
is that what makes...
There's only one performance, and you never have a rehearsal. So you can never give a good performance.
You think most people have that view of life? Or is it a particular Milligan perspective?
I don't know. I presume that a lot of people in the third world today are finding life very, very cruel. And
But
no,
here?
I would say it's cruel to hear. I mean, say, when little children are beaten to death, I mean, we had 39,000 cases of beatings of children this year. It's a cruel life, yes. It is a bloody cruel life all the way down the line. And people seek release these days in sex or alcohol, or drugs or discos, because the life is very painful.
You have a temperament such that were you to read something about a really distressing event, it turns the hair in your head.
It does, unfortunately, alas. But I'm glad. It makes me very angry.
Yeah.
And then it generates that sort of anger you need to do something about it. I mean, I just heard about a family, just by chance, who had let a dog die in a garage a month ago, and they'd been forbidden by the court to have a dog. And I've discovered they've got another dog. So immediately I wrote to the police in Berkhamsted. I mean, but if I hadn't got that anger in me, I wouldn't have done it. A lot of people let it slide, and it's a tragedy of life to let something slide. That's appalling.
Some people are frightened by cruelty because it attracts.
And some people ignore cruelty. I mean, in the papers yesterday, a girl of 17 screamed her head off in a block of flats whenever it could hear, and she was killed. And the police said they were stunned that nobody came near them.
But
that makes me very, 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 very angry.
Yeah.
But the appalling part is possibly if that girl was in the house and the other people were screaming, she wouldn't interfere either. So that puts the human race on the line when it comes to laughingly called being human.
and if that girl screamed in the house, I'm not asking you what you'd like to do, but do you think that,
I wouldn't hesitate.
without a doubt, you know that about yourself?
It'll be the end of me one day because I'll get involved in something that I can't handle. I mean, I'll rush across to a punch-up or something to try and save somebody, and I might get killed myself. But that's the way it goes.
If you were to pinpoint something about yourself that you dislike most, what would it be?
How many hours have we got for this now? God, that's a wonderful leading question. I would like to say I plead guilty but insane.
Perhaps that's what you do when you ask it. You plead guilty but insane.
That's a very good question, Tony. I'm trying to think this. Kind of sounds as if I'm ego. Plus, I can't think of anything particularly at the moment that I wish to God I could. Being, yes, I suppose, being ungenerous to people who can't match me mentally. I suppose I dismiss them too easily. And then I have resentment about it, of course. I always have terrible resentment about it. That's why I think I try to help people who are handicapped mentally. Because I think basically I would like to walk away and say, oh, that's the throw of the dice in life. I think maybe that's what I'm doing. I don't know, Tony. I don't know. Truly, I don't know.
That was Spike Milligan talking to Dr. Antony Clare in the Psychiatrist's chair. Produced by Michael Ember.